and welcome to this conversation presented by White House Custom Color. I'm Jed Toffer. Thanks for listening. You know, my wife Vicki and I have owned and operated our photography studio, V Gallery, for 20 years now. White House has been our lab for the last 16 of those years, and we could not be happier. White House is a family-run business, just like ours. If you haven't already, check them out at WHCC.com. And if you want to drop me a line, feel free to email me at jed@WHCC.com. For years, I've heard people in the photography industry tell my wife that they wish they had a Jed. And by that, they mean that it would be nice to have some built-in support to help them with various tasks, such as workflow systems and marketing strategies, pricing structures, Photoshop techniques, and the like. And I get where they're coming from. Many people have to take care of that stuff on their own. Which brings me to Craig Swanson. You may not recognize his name right away, but Craig is responsible for thousands of hours of education and supportive content, all in the past decade alone. His passion is helping creatives excel at their passion. He considers himself somewhat of an outsider, and that may be the case, but I'm here to tell you, this is one outsider who's on your side.
Okay. I mean, I've been responsible for, God, I don't know how many thousands of hours of photography education. Mm-hmm. I am probably one of the most highly educated non-photographers in the art of photography that you're going to run into.
Right. Right.
And you know what? It's funny. Actually, one of my our TD from the original CreativeLive crew, so the person that basically watches every course and was switching between different cameras, is also a non-photographer, Adam.
Yes.
And we were talking about this together. And he was at a friend's house, and they're having a problem with their camera, for the focus and everything. He just like took it and started fiddling around, just basically fixing all that. And he's not a photographer. He never takes photos, but he, like me, has watched thousands of hours of the best photography education that we can find.
Right.
But I'll tell you what, there's a little tip that I ran into when people hand me a camera, something that has never been taught in most of the classes that I've been involved in, where the on button is. It's one of those little things. I love it. Yeah, so I have this encyclopedic knowledge of focal lengths and of of how you diagram out certain information in order to be able to describe. What's one of my favorite ones I was looking at? I remember the very first course that Zach Arias taught, and for me, that was the very first photography course that I really ever got exposed to off-camera flash in any form whatsoever.
Yeah.
So that was, at that point, I had been involved in 20 or 30 hours of photographic education. You know, now, gosh, nearly a decade later, every genre, every form, like I know all of these people. I know all the different skills. I've evaluated all these different instructors.
How does that happen? How does a non-photographer get so deep into an industry of which he's not? Because photographers talk about passion a lot. Like, this is my passion. Like, I can't imagine doing anything else. Like, you've heard it, I've heard it, and neither one of us are a photographer. So I understand passion, but I don't understand. The passion for photography doesn't resonate for me in that same way. So how does somebody like you get so far into an industry and get so get responsible for so much content in something that he doesn't do?
So in general, I have always been an outsider in whatever industry I'm supporting. But I've spent my entire career supporting creatives. I use a little bit of an example of where I came from. My father was a nuclear chemist. He worked at Los Alamos Laboratories, and my mother was effectively a hippie. I went to preschool and early schooling in a teepee, and was learning intersocial communication.
This is all in New Mexico?
It's all in New Mexico.
Okay.
And I like to think that basically this is how I've reconciled those two forces in my life.
Really interesting.
Is I basically have spent my career being the left brain support for right brain professionals.
Okay.
Being the technical support, the business support, the structural support, building structural foundations that allow creative artists to flourish.
And they need that so much.
Yeah. So most of my career was spent with graphic designers, ad agencies, videographers, and photographers.
Yep.
From a business standpoint. And business, computers, early days when technology was first coming in, I was teaching people the very first version of Photoshop and dealing with all the issues around that. But it's always been from the standpoint of helping create structural foundations that allow creative professionals to lead a sustainable life. So you talked about passion. For me, my passion comes from allowing people to unlock a sustainable life around their passion.
Okay. Your passion is helping other people with their passion.
And passionate, and I guess specifically passion around creative industries. I mean,
Right.
I think
Specifically, right.
I'm sure that there are passionate accountants that I might get a similar charge from, but I've never been exposed to that yet.
That's what's next.
Maybe.
Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
So in the very early days, I was supporting graphic designers in the transition from typography houses to having the early copies of Adobe PageMaker or Quark, to the early transition to color. I traveled around, and when I was 21, I spent a year traveling as a consultant for Kodak. That had they had this system called the Kodak Prophecy System. It was one of the very early color scanners and color separation systems that were digital that were trying to come into the market. And frankly, it was terrible.
Well, okay, I believe you.
And what they needed in order to be able to complete the cycle was all of the computer knowledge and how you use the desktop processing software in order to be able to make the scanning system and everything else work together and be able to output. So I spent a lot of time working with print houses, and I have a lot of background in graphic design and print. So I've been surrounded by things that photography is a feeder into.
Right.
I'm not a photographer myself.
Right. So then how did you go from there to further into the photography industry?
So it all kind of aligns with what was happening in business at the time. So I had an IT company in Seattle, and we were supporting local design agencies, ad agencies, photography houses, video production houses, and such. And over about 20 years of doing that work, I slowly moved from being an independent, where it was just me, and then I had my first couple contractors, and then I had employees. I got it to a point where it was running pretty well without me. It got to the place where if I didn't show up, the work got done.
Things still happened.
Yeah.
Was that intentional? Or did that just kind of happen?
No, it was intentional, and it was lucky, and it took a lot of work.
Okay. Right.
So in every 7 years of I can track it back. Basically, first 7 years it was just me.
Yeah.
Second 7 years it was me struggling to figure out how to hire employees, and I was a terrible boss, and I didn't want to hire employees, and I was not good at handing over responsibility. And I would say in the last 7 years of that 21-year cycle, it was me really turning over the engine of that business to the employees. In fact, that company, Creative Tech, is still running. The employees purchased it from me.
Is that right?
When I spun off and launched CreativeLive with Chase.
Right. Okay. So that's still going.
Yeah, it's still going. In fact, I was looking at this. Pretty much most of the companies that I have been involved in starting are still going.
Really? That's testament to you.
To a part. It's a testament to a lot of things.
Right.
But I like creating systems that can become bigger. And so what ended up happening, what got me into photography and everything else is we were doing Photoshop training, Adobe product training.
Right.
I had created basically a training company inside of my IT company because all of our clients were creatives. And the analogy I used is a lot of business owners, when they reach a certain period of success, they'll buy a boat.
Okay.
Instead of me buying a boat, I basically poured that money into a a very expensive and not profitable at all training division within my central company, within Creative Text.
Okay.
And basically spent 2 years. We made no money. It supported. It made our clients really happy.
Right.
And we were able to play with a lot of ideas and a lot of the concepts that eventually became like the foundation of what CreativeLive grew out of were birthed there. But in that kind of incubator status within my old company, it was not really successful.
Okay.
And it really didn't become successful until the financial crash of around 2008.
Okay.
When all of a sudden, what was once a very successful IT company could continue to be financially successful,
Right.
but it couldn't afford to pay a do-nothing executive with a expensive education hobby.
I love it. How much did you have to wait for certain things technologically to come up to speed with what you wanted, with what ended up happening, and what you wanted to do? Like,
Oh, okay. So
we couldn't do things.
Oh, it was so okay. So first of all, we started okay. So during the 2 years that I was just trying to come up with different modes of doing education, we were breaking education into smaller pieces. We were doing in-person workshops.
Sure.
We started doing some webinars. We just basically are cycling through all these different ways of doing this. And I was doing this with a friend of mine, Jason Hoppy, that is a really fantastic instructor.
Yeah.
And he was like the first instructor that launched what became CreativeLive.
Sure.
And yeah, the technology was just coming there. Webinars were just coming into play.
Right.
And we were using GoToWebinar as this sharing tool for screen sharing. And GoToWebinar had this 1,000 person limit.
I remember. Yes.
Which I always assumed. I assumed it was purely a marketing limit. I seriously, I thought, who would have a 1,000 person webinar?
You didn't think it was real.
I didn't think it was real. And then we did kind of in this Hail Mary pass where basically like my hobby was coming to an end. I'd been 2 years of building out all this technology and all this way of doing education. We launched pretty much as a Hail Mary pass the 10-day or the 10-week Photoshop course, where basically we're giving away for free.
Okay.
10-week course for free. And then we basically figured if we're going to go out, we're going to at least go out having shown this to as many people as we can.
Go out with a bang.
And two things happened. On that first day, because I had a large mailing list that I had been building up over time, on that first day when we did our free Photoshop course, our 1,000 person limit was hit within 3 minutes of going live.
Right away.
And that was the first moment that I realized that the 1,000 person limit was actually real.
This is not just a marketing
So
point.
that became the first really major limit that I had. Oh my God, I can't provide free training for more than 1,000 people at a time.
Right.
And so that first 10-week experiment, which if you go back and actually, we have archives of it, but if you actually watch that, most of the business model of CreativeLive is in a very early prototype stage in that. Basically, give it away for free, and if it's good, enough people will want to purchase it for ongoing access forever.
Like the concepts are there.
Exactly. The
Everything's
concepts
laid
are
out.
there, and it made more money. It made more money in that 10-week period than anything I had done in total over the last 2 years with my experimental business.
So were you had to be thinking to yourself, "Ooh, I'm onto something here."
Yeah, actually, I think I'm onto something here.
Right.
And then what happened is on week 2, we started up our webinar early and told people, and so actually it got earlier. Like the 1,000 person limit got hit earlier and earlier and earlier every week. So like the first week, the 1,000 person limit got hit like 5 minutes into the broadcast.
What happens when it gets hit? The other people just are locked out?
They just locked out. They can't get in.
So you do have 1,000 people that it moves on normally.
And then you just get a bunch of people emailing you and complaining.
Right. I had no idea. I mean, I remember that 1,000 person limit, but I never knew. I was never in a position to know what would happen.
And I started emailing them, and yeah. So then we did our second. We let the dust settle after this, and we looked at this, And what happened is, so that was, I think, in 2009, and there became this shift within my company where all of a sudden the education company started carrying the rest of the IT company during this time of just distress within the industry.
Of course. Yeah. Because that was rough for a while.
It was rough. And especially if you were a designer or a photographer, like our clients were in great distress.
Yeah. Yep.
It was a really tough time. Yeah. It was also a really good time educationally to be in business. I mean, there are these moments in time that help entrepreneurs and business owners become better.
Right.
And launching in a down market or experiencing a down market, I think, is one of the signs of someone that's going to be in business long term versus someone who only knows how to succeed.
Well, because you have to.
Yeah.
Or you're not going to make it.
Well, you don't have to. I mean, like there's a lot of alternatives to succeeding.
Well, I'm talking about succeeding. Right. Mm-hmm. Interesting. Mm-hmm. And so that was essentially the birth of CreativeLive.
Yeah. So and I was talking to Chase about what that, like the results that were happening in there.
Right.
And we spun up another course on Illustrator and got similar results and basically started saying, hey, this might be a repeatable system.
There's something here.
And then Chase brought in Zach Arias and a couple others, Vincent LaFerre, and basically
we got some big names right away.
Yeah, and that's all Chase. That's all Chase. In fact, I didn't know anything.
Well, you wouldn't know who those people were.
Wouldn't know who the people were.
Right.
I didn't know really what photography education looked like.
How did you know Chase to begin with?
He was a client of mine.
He was a client of yours
for probably about a decade.
Okay.
So because he has he had a huge server, like Chase is cutting edge, and we were supporting him.
You had a lot of really nice stars aligned there for you. Like you being one of them, honestly.
It was lucky. We were, there are a couple hot spots. Seattle was one of the hot spots with Aldus and Adobe and a lot of technology.
Right.
And incredibly fortunate.
So as technology over the years has grown and increased and just exponentially helped us to get to where we are really today, education, online education in particular, has been a big deal, right? And so you, with your passion of helping other people with their passion, especially creatives, this is like a big sandbox for you, isn't it? Like, is that fair to say? Like, the potential for what you can do based on what you love to do is enormous.
Yeah.
As evidenced by the way things have gone, right? Because now you have these other endeavors.
Yeah. So what we're doing now, so Digital Product Studio, which is my company with George and Aaron,
Yes.
George Fernakis and Aaron Anderson.
Right.
We basically are a company that invests in, launches, and grows education platforms for niche communities in really interesting creative areas. So, I mean, Sue Bryce Education being one of the one of the big ones.
Sure. What is the sky the limit? I mean, what?
I always feel like there is this 3-year window at which anything I know how to do right now is going to evaporate, or just lose its value. So it is. Everything is changing. Everything is changing. It's becoming easier and easier for people to teach all sorts of things without having to go through the same filters that we had to go through before.
Doesn't mean it's going to be good, though.
No, and
in fact that's the big piece as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah,
because I can go to YouTube and watch a lot of stuff for free.
Everything we have ever taught or been involved in teaching, the information itself can be had for a properly worded Google search.
Okay, fair enough.
Yeah.
But you got to know that.
You got to know that. And also, information is only part of the equation.
Okay.
And for me, I think, so there's actually a little bit of background that helps kind of explain kind of my mindset for creating education that a lot of people that know me know, but it might not... Let me think about how to say this.
I'm intrigued.
So one of the really important parts of my personal story is my daughter, Pepper. My daughter, Pepper, was born with Down syndrome. We were prenatally diagnosed. And it was a really tough pregnancy with that knowledge and figuring out what life was going to be.
Yes, sir.
That the process of becoming Pepper's dad, as soon as she was born, I stopped working Fridays. As soon as she was born, we had a really honest conversation between my wife and I about the business. And the business, which had been my baby for all of my life, was no longer my baby because I had a real baby.
Yeah.
And that started to transform my relationship with the business where it could grow to the next level, where it could actually rely on the employees.
Okay.
So that was part of me becoming free to be able to make things that are bigger. And then the other part is I became deeply enmeshed in special needs education.
Okay.
For many years. We were lucky to have an amazing education program that we were part of. And so while Pepper was going through the special program, she was intermixed with children with autism and other children. And watching how those teachers worked with those children remapped my own internal understanding of how education works. And in a lot of ways, everything that I've created since then through CreativeLive, through what I was doing at Creative Text previously, and now with Digital Product Studio and anything else that we're involved in, kind of like harkens back to a lot of the lessons I learned from being around special needs education. In a lot of ways, so education for me and learning for me is not about information. Because information is free, information is everywhere, and information doesn't change lives, not as a general rule.
Okay.
People need context and purpose and connection to make that information into something that they can weave into the story of their life.
Okay. Yep.
And the way that I watch children with autism being taught is that all the education that was focused on was basically focused on teaching social cues and creating an explicit understanding of the social structure so that those kids knew how to go to the next step.
Yeah.
And I started to see in the world of online education, I see the viewership as similar to an autistic learner.
Okay.
The viewer of our courses can only pick up social cues that we make explicit.
Right.
They can't feel the emotion in the room unless we work to make the emotion in the room feel.
Right, because they're not there.
They're not there. There's all these things, and this is probably the biggest weakness I see with people trying to make the transition from in-person education to online education.
Right.
Is when you are teaching in a room with 10 people, you have all this interpersonal information that's available to you. And the best teachers of small group education, and by the way, like some of the best education happens in that type of environment.
Sure, agreed.
Those same skills,
without
someone to translate them, don't work online.
Yeah.
Because the social cues do not get communicated to an online audience unless someone is working hard to make it present.
To make it so, right.
Exactly. So that means... it means everything. It means everything. In early days, like the classic thing that you teach any new speaker is repeat the audience's question.
Yeah.
And that is an incredibly foreign thing for a new speaker to do.
Yeah.
When someone asks something, to repeat the question back and then to answer it.
Right. It's not what you first think to do.
Exactly.
It's like a learned
and it
thing.
feels foreign. It feels foreign and weird in the mouth of the person who's new to that.
Right.
There's another step beyond that, which is to repeat the emotional context to the question.
Okay, what does that mean?
So if, for example, somebody asks a question and nobody is there to hear it, to repeat the question by also acknowledging the emotional and social context of what's ever happening. I notice your body is a little bit tense as you ask me how this is happening.
Okay, got it.
I see you scratching your head as you ask this.
Right.
Using words to be able to communicate. And of course, this was more important in the days when we only had a webinar to do it. Now we've got, hundreds of thousands of dollars of video gear, so I can make sure that we've got a technical director that's pushing into different things.
That's on top of it, and they can see that, and that can be conveyed. Sure.
But I would say the biggest thing that I bring to the productions that we're involved in is I'm constantly trying to make sure that somebody who is sitting at home feels connected to whatever we're doing.
It makes so much sense to me. What you're saying is resonating, but it also makes so much sense to me why for you that's a thing. Experiencing what you have in the education system.
I don't want to maybe. I use 2 touch points for me when I'm talking with potential new instructors. One is especially if they have any experience working with kids with autism, a little bit of a touch point of being able to learn how to not assume that the other party can read your mind, but actually be able to start to speak into the emotion and the context of what's happening.
Right.
And then the other context I use, the other example I use is Bob Newhart.
Okay, I know Bob. I know who he is.
Yeah, Bob Newhart. So if you've ever seen like an old stand-up routine with Bob Newhart, and this was especially important in the early days when we were doing webinars, where basically you had a postage stamp size video and you had whatever the mic of the instructor was picking up. Okay. Bob Newhart would do these routines where he would stand alone on a stage, mimicking that he is talking into a phone call, and we only heard his side of the phone call.
Okay.
And the entire experience would be brought to life from his responding to what he is pretending he's hearing.
You're not hearing the other person because they don't exist.
Exactly.
But you're getting both sides of the conversation through one side.
Exactly.
Right.
And if you actually like break down how those routines are structured, nobody talks like that, but it feels natural, and that's what a really
that's
good.
The piece that he was able to make it feel natural, even though nobody like repeats things on the phone. Oh, so you're saying right?
Exactly. The ability in an online education context to make the other side of that conversation feel heard, where they are completely muted unless you do something to surface them, is the magic of great online education, in my opinion.
I think you're right. And there's a lot of evidence to support that. Plus, everything you're saying like resonates as true. Like it makes sense to me.
You know, a lot of people, so the comments I hear from people from most of the education programs I've been involved in, like I feel like we're really hitting it when there are a lot of comments saying, I feel like I'm there.
Right, and that's it. But I bet I'd wonder this. I wonder if people could put their finger on it. Like all the things that you're saying, like if they would say, oh, it's because of this, and this. I have the sense that they'd be like, I don't know why, but I just feel like I'm in that room.
If we're doing it right. And it can be as simple as a lot of angles. There's a lot that needs to be conveyed besides the education. You know, if you look at what's happening here at the Portrait Masters right now, you could get almost everything. I mean, honestly, we could give a transcript and the slide deck, and we could actually convey all the information.
I understand, sure.
But the audience response, like when Lola Milani was shooting, the audience response when Lola is shooting is as important for me to the educational process as whatever is being conveyed on that stage. And I think that's also one of the big things for me in terms of building education platforms. For me, the hero of the education platform is always the person sitting on the other side of that screen.
Okay.
And I think instinctively, most people in education make the instructor the hero.
Yeah, that makes sense. That makes sense to me.
And for me, I will watch almost all the events that we do, and I watch it from my computer, or I'll watch it on my iPhone walking around.
Right.
And
because you want to experience it that way, the way that they do.
The way they do,
right.
and honestly, the way I do. I'm very introverted.
Okay.
So for example, you haven't seen me except once in this whole event.
Yeah, that's true. And it was accidental.
And I was far away from the crowd.
You were in the corner, ways away. Yeah.
But I want to feel connected.
Right.
And so as I'm watching through my screen, if I feel like I am disconnected from what is being taught, I feel pain. And I feel pain on behalf of the audience.
I understand. Sure.
And so I'm constantly trying to make sure that they feel connected to whatever we do, because they are the ones that we need to respect. Like it's a mark of respect. It's a mark of who's responsible for making this thing possible.
Sure.
I walk through the trade show and people are thanking me.
Yeah.
And I mean, they are the hero of this. Like when I look at everything that makes Sue Bryce Education, this conference that we're at, work, it is the community. Yeah. We could do everything that we're doing technically, everything that we've done, we could do. And if these people didn't show up, it would be nothing.
Wouldn't happen.
And there is just this kind of this. There's literally this part of my brain that feels uncomfortable, that feels on edge, if we are not providing context and connection to the viewers.
You have certainly done that many times over, okay, in with different companies and in different venues. You've accomplished a lot, in especially in a relative sense. What else do you want to do? I mean, is there something where you're like, I still want to do this. I haven't done this.
I love growing. So I think at each stage of my career, I am just now coming into what I think of as being my entrepreneurial career.
Just now?
Within the last 3 years.
Okay, fair enough.
So not saying, so an entrepreneur for me is something different from a business owner.
Okay, I get that.
Yeah.
Yep.
And I'm coming into a phase where I'm an entrepreneur working with other entrepreneurs, and I'm building things with other entrepreneurs. In a lot of ways, every 3 years, I am trying to build with whatever I was doing 3 years ago. That role becomes the input to what I'm building now.
Okay.
So when I first started in education, we were playing with the mechanisms of how to provide education in a slightly different format. This were the 2 or 3 years of kind of incubator where we were basically chopping up classes into smaller sections, figuring out how we could combine a live audience with a webinar audience, like all these different pieces. At CreativeLive, we were looking at how we could effectively take a 3-day photography experience, create a digital version of that, and then start to do that in scale, where we were doing it first once every 2 months, and they were doing once a month, and then we got down doing once a week.
Well, and you refined the whole experience in the process.
Exactly.
As well.
Exactly. At this point with Digital Product Studio, we're at the phase where George, Aaron, and I are effectively launching education companies at scale.
Right.
So we are creating not just the courses, but the entire company as an entity, as a business model, proving out the concept, finding an audience, supporting that audience, and then growing that. And 3 years from now, 4 years from now, if I keep on the same track, I think that probably becomes working at some additional scale to that, where, I mean, honestly, one of the things I would really like to do is a Y Combinator for online educators, where we bring in a batch of 30 really great educators, and through a 3 to 6 month program, including a lot of support on the video, technical, and educational side, basically allow a whole batch of people to create a whole new series of online engagements using the models and the mechanisms that we've been specializing in.
Yeah, you can jump outside of this sphere. I found it interesting, speaking with Sue earlier, that she seems to keep going to things from a conceptual standpoint that she kept saying applies across the board. Like these things, these concepts, they apply to people. They don't just apply to photographers or creatives. You know, and CreativeLive evolved in that same vein very similarly. But you're talking about separate companies that then take that and just run with it. Like, so these things that we're teaching and these things that we're showing, they're not just for creatives and they're not just for photographers. They're for realtors. They're for chefs. They're for the construction industry. Whatever, what have you, right? And that the sky does seem like the limit there.
And actually, that is the thing that we are starting to work on. George, Aaron, and I is basically what is the next.
Right.
You know, what is the next platform or several platforms? You know, what are we going to launch next, and who are we going to partner with next in terms of creating something really special?
I like the fact that you guys have that attitude. I think there's a danger in resting on your laurels. I think there's a danger in getting stuck in the rut of success, and you're not doing that. You're already looking to what's next, and you have a fantastic team to do it with you.
Oh my goodness.
It's amazing.
It really is. The team is absolutely phenomenal. And I've got to say, I mean, I don't even know who to credit. I've got to credit that. Like a huge portion of that goes to Aaron.
Yeah.
Aaron Anderson. I mean, actually, I guess to George and probably to me to some degree too, because it's repeating. Like this is probably the best team we've ever worked with, but it's not the first incredible team that has come together to build these types of things.
Of course.
And so just the fact that Aaron has done it more than once makes me think that there is something he is doing about picking the right people.
Oh yeah, it's not coincidence.
Mm-hmm.
I tell you what, thank you for doing this with me.
Yeah.
Thank you for taking the time out, because I know there's a lot going on here. And this has been a wonderful convention. We're here towards the end of the Portrait Masters 2018, just outside of Phoenix, Arizona. And you taking the time to do this with me means a lot. And so I appreciate it. And I'll be looking to see how the next endeavors go. I know that.
I will too. I think the next couple of years are going to be absolutely amazing.
It's going to be really, really fun to watch. Thank you, Craig, and have a great evening.